Hi everyone, Jenny Black again. I'm back here to show you the floral part of our class, and we're going to work on this flower here. What I want to point out to you is you could have colored, or I could have colored this flower all flat, and it would not have had any life or dimension to it. Or had I put the shading down in here and the highlight at the tip, it would have looked like the tips were kind of going upwards. But I wanted it to look as if the petals were bent right here, because a lot of times that's how flowers do. They kind of bend right there. And so that's what I wanted to show. You can see the same thing on my purple one. What I did is I worked in a cylinder fashion, and so I put my highlight here in the center because it's a curve, which is the same as a half a cylinder, so it's a curve shape. I put my highlight here in the center, and I worked my way to my dark back to here, and I worked my way back to my dark right here. If you wanted to add a little bit more shading down in here, you could even add a little bit of gray. And then here on my stamen, I just used some browns, and then we'll talk about the leaf a little bit. So let's get started. I have my paper here. I've chosen to use the red combination because both Copics and Spectrum have a nice combination of reds. Whoops. This one, usually I use an R29, but that's okay. It looks like I'm going to use an R27 today. So I have an R89. You could also use an R59. I have an R27, an R24, and an R22. So let's get started here. I like to do my little plan or my image study, and so I'm going to put my color out to where I want my highlight. And I'm going to try to line this highlight up with on the next petal. So I have to turn my paper here a little bit. I'm going to, so now my fold or my bend is going to be kind of consistent. This is just a base layer. It does not need to be perfect. It kind of helps me from making mistakes with my darker colors because I know where I want to go and where I want to place my color. You can see I'm kind of using a flicking motion. I kind of like to do feathering when I'm doing flowers. I like a little bit less blended look. And how I do that is, I'm going to step over here to this piece of paper here, is my son's analogy of this is it's kind of like an airplane taking off. So the wheels on the runway kind of gently lift. See how they gently lift? So you have less ink here at the end of your stroke than you do at the beginning of your stroke. If you set your pen down and then you flick, you get a blob right here. So that doesn't work very well. You want to kind of touch the paper while in motion. So here you go. Some people have a hard time doing that. And so what I do is I take a piece of paper like this, and I will kind of flick off the paper. And that way I have a nice straight line. That works great for grass at the bottom of one of your images, to do a little something like that. But that's kind of flicking. The position of your pen really makes a difference on your stroke. So if you have it bent over quite a bit, you get a wide stroke. If you have it straight up and down, you get this little tiny stroke. You can't see past my hand, sorry. You get these little tiny strokes. And so it kind of depends. If you want little tiny ones, you're going to hold the pen straight up, and the wider you want, the more you're going to bend your pen over. So you can see I'm bending my pen way over, and I get really wide strokes. Little tiny ones if I have it straight up and down. So that's how you're going to get your flicking motion. Otherwise you can go ahead and blend. I'm not going to leave this dirty piece of paper underneath because if I'm coloring on top, it's going to wick through once it gets wet. So we're going to get rid of that and have a clean piece of scrap paper underneath and continue on with this. You can see I'm starting to turn, so I'm kind of bending my highlight a little bit. And that's how I get my plan or my image study started. So I studied it, I knew where I wanted my folds of my petals, and I just kind of added it in with my lightest color because I'm going to color on top of this. If I made a mistake, it's not really a big deal. I'm just going to put a darker color on top of it and nobody would ever know. So I use the lightest color that I'm going to use for my image study or my plan. So there is my base coat. I did it with an R22. So let's set that aside and now get started on adding color. I'm only going to color a couple of the petals because I don't want to make the video way too long. So I'm just going to color a couple of them. I prefer to only color 1 or 2 petals at a time because I want the ink to stay wet. So here's my darkest color, my burgundy, an R89 or an R59. Spectrum would be an DR7. Out here I don't want quite as much shading, so I'm going to add just a little bit. Now I'm going to step down to my R27 or my R29. In spectrum, this would be a DR5. And now I'm going to do the same so you can see it's the same as with the kitty cat hat box. I'm overlapping the previous color, diluting the edge of it and pulling it out. And now I'm going to step down to my R24. And now I'm going to step down to my R22. My paper won't stay still for me. There we go. You can see I'm using a little bit more of my pointed tip because I like it to have a little bit of a textured look at the very end. You can blend it nice and smooth or you can give it a textured look. It's up to you. Some people like to leave a little bit of white here, some people do not. It's a total preference. Do it the way you like. If you don't think some of your colors have blended, remember to go back to the previous color and add it again. So there are 2 of my petals. I would just continue myself around the circle and do a couple of them at a time until I was completely done. Now I'm going to do my leaf. So with my leaf, I'm going to use these colors, a YG67, a YG63, YG03, and I'm going to add a little bit of this C5 in here. So let's go up to here so you can see what I'm doing. I'm going to have my leaf. So I study my leaf and I determine which way I want it to go. I want the center of my leaf to be dented down in there and this to come out. So sometimes I'm even going to be more intense and make like a hill here and a valley here, but I'm not going to get that intense this time. So I'm going to pull a little bit of gray in here. And I could do my little base coat of my lightest color if I wanted to keep me on track. You can skip this step if you want because a leaf is pretty basic. I'm going to put my highlight on the very edge. Sometimes I'll put a Y11 or a CT1, a very light yellow on the edges of my leaf, and that kind of gives it a little fun tip. Now I'm going to go to my YG67, which is my darkest green. Whatever green combination you picked, go ahead and pick out your darkest color. That gray just kind of gives it a center so that I actually have a line down the center and I can work my way towards the edges. I actually want a little bit more gray, so I'm going to add another little line of gray in here. I want it to look a little deeper right there. Okay, now let's step down to our next green, which is a YG63, and I'm going to color over the edge of the previous color, diluting the edge of the previous color and pulling it out towards my highlight. I'm coloring kind of in little squiggles or circles, going into the dark and pulling it into the lighter color. That green is sometimes a little bit difficult. There it goes. Now it's starting to blend. So it blended, and now I'm going to step down to my YG03 and color the tips of my leaf. Whoops, I forgot my medium over here. Whoops. I told you I get sidetracked sometimes. So let's go back. This is my medium green. And now I'll go to my lightest green. Coloring in circles over the edge of the previous color. And there we go. My stem, I'm not going to worry too much about it. I'm just going to color it. Just color it one color. Sometimes I might color it two colors. If you want, you can actually add a light yellow on top of your green. And I just want to show you what it does. It kind of brightens it. You don't want to add too heavy of a layer. It's going to start diluting your color. You can see how it just brightens it a little bit. So sometimes I do like to put a Y11 or a light yellow on top of my leaves. That's kind of a personal choice, like I said, but if you like to do that, go ahead and give that a try. Now for the center here, for my stamen, I'm going to use a couple browns. I'm going to go ahead and for this one, I want my highlight right here. It's a small area. I'm not going to go ahead and put my plan in there. So I'm just going to add my dark brown in here. There's several color combination choices on your charts. So here's my dark color. And now I'm going to come in with a lighter color, diluting the edge of the previous color. And then you can put a lighter color right there in the center. Here I chose to use a yellow. And there's your stamen. So that's how I colored my flower. I wanted to get my curves in each of my petals, and I got my shading right down the center of my leaf, and I would just color my stem with a green, and then your little guy here, your bumblebee, I couldn't think what he was called, sorry. You just color him in. I just colored him in yellow. So there you go. I hope you enjoyed the class. Now what I would like you guys to do is to go ahead and find an image of your own that you would like to color and go ahead and color it. And that will be your final project. So I'll give you a couple samples. You might want to pick out another floral color. You might want to pick out an image that has some cylinder shapes in it or some sphere shapes. Pick something simple. Don't pick something with hair and skin like a person. Those are a little bit harder, and we will do those in another class. So pick something that doesn't have a person's face and skin. You can pick animals or you can pick florals, etc. So go ahead, and I'll see you in the forum.